Welcome to Lore Meets Reality, Bioshock. Today, we want to know, can plasmids exist? Have you ever wanted to move objects with your mind? Light things on fire with a snap of your fingers? Or maybe control a swarm of bees? All seem very impossible, but how can we take the lore that makes up a Bioshock plasmid and bring it to reality? So, to start, let's look at how this actually happens in a game. Our hero finds a vial on the ground filled with a glowing liquid. Once he injects this liquid into himself, because, you know, shooting up yourself with a glowing liquid is always a good idea. Anyway, once he injects them, the DNA of the sea slugs actually goes in and rewrites his DNA. This gives him abilities to do things such as shoot lightning bolts, control bees, and light things on fire. All of these are amazing abilities to gain, but last time I checked, there's nothing like that in the real world. So, before we can look at how we can get these powers, we'd need to look at how we can possibly rewrite your DNA. Because I'm pretty sure you can't just go to your computer and pick a new DNA code. Yet, anyway.
The answer is simple: a virus. Viruses are incredible little things that can actually rewrite your DNA to an extent. Viruses, however, don't tend to manifest themselves in substantial outside physical changes. So physically seeing your hand on fire or bees crawling out of your skin is a bit far-fetched. But there are examples of this type of thing. Mumps, for example, will actually rewrite your DNA to allow for a very visible and clear swelling of the throat. The HPV virus will actually cause warts on the skin, and the smallpox virus, if left untreated, will give you fluid-filled pustules on your skin. These pustules will actually fall off eventually if you live long enough. But let's think for a minute. Obviously, the sea slug's DNA used in Bioshock is actually rewriting your DNA, so we'll assume that we're talking about designer viruses manufactured in a laboratory. So, with some rewriting of the way the virus works, maybe instead of putting fluid-filled pustules on your skin, it'll actually implant locations for bees to hide. Or perhaps they can allow your inner body temperature to heat to such a degree that you could actually ignite things on fire. Just a thought.
So, with a little bit of research, we could make viruses rewrite your DNA to allow for these things to happen. But to actually give you some of these powers would take a bit more. I mean, we can give you the holes for your bees to hide in, but we couldn't possibly make you actually create bees out of the blue to throw at your enemies. Just like if you could become hot enough to ignite things, how do you keep your own flesh from burning off? Well, this is where a bit more science would be needed to help. We'll need to genetically engineer things or even implant things. So infected, how is that possible?
Recently, the National Human Genome Research Institute reported a mutation in a gene that codes for muscle protein known as a myostatin, which can increase muscle mass and enhance racing performance in racing dogs. Some wonder if we can mutate the genes of a human athlete to give them an edge also. Using the same technology, we have actually placed human traits into mice. Experimental mice have actually been given the ability to see in color just like a human. So now we just need to consider, how would you possibly be able to produce fire from your hands? Well, let's go with a different idea. Instead of your internal temperature rising, what if you could just throw a liquid that would ignite farther from your body? Well, thanks to the very same genetic engineering, scientists are actually creating a strand of E. coli that can convert sugars into an oil that acts exactly like diesel. So let's combine all of this genetic genome rewriting, and you get someone who is faster, stronger, and able to project a flammable fluid that could ignite. The only thing we would need to do now is give an igniting agent, but this could be where machines might have to be allowed. We don't want to get too complex with our genetic rewriting. I mean, it's not like we're trying to make the human fly or anything. So we'll just use a simple lighter. You know, put on top of a suit, or maybe just holding it in your hand, and ta-da! You're a human flamethrower. Through the genetic engineering, we have an endless amount of possibilities, but what kind of things can we possibly do really close to today, not 10 years in the future? Well, let's take for example the ability to shoot lightning bolts in the Bioshock games. This is in particular a favorite of a lot of the players. Well, using the genetic manipulation, we could take the ability to generate two types of electricity from an electric eel. The electric eel has two organs in its body that regulate the ions in its body. When it chooses to, it can shock its prey by sending a signal through its nervous system that will eventually get to these organs. They then open up the ion channels in its body. This allows sodium to flow through and reverses the polarity of these electric organs momentarily. This creates the electric shock that we all know. Now, there is already research on these cells being conducted at Yale University. The scientists there are trying to find a way to make artificial versions of these cells to place them into the human body as a power source for things such as medical implants. But what if we could just genetically grow these cells ourselves? Enter the genome research once again. The last big power we wanted to go over is the bee power. So we already discussed how we could use a virus to rewrite your DNA and create holes in your arms for the bees to hide in. But the question is, how could you get the bees to listen to you? First, we need to look at how the bees function within the colony. The bees recognize their queen because of the pheromone that she secretes. If a scientist were able to genetically create a colony of bees and program them to recognize a pheromone the scientist would have to engineer for you, he could make you produce this pheromone. Then you will have at your disposal an army of devout bees. In this sense, you'll be acting as the hive and the queen bee at the same time. So when you're under attack, you as the queen bee and the hive are now threatened. You could then release the bees out into the environment and allow them to do what they do naturally, defend the hive and their queen.
So the overall answer to Bioshock powers is, viruses can rewrite your DNA, and through various genetic manipulation, eventually we could gain these powers. Do you think we got this one? Or do you think we've reached a little too far? Also, let us know if there are more Bioshock powers you'd like explained. We wouldn't mind doing a follow-up episode. Join us next time as we discuss how Metal Gears and cyborg bodies are possible. Because when we show you the research we found, you're gonna be signing up for the cyborg army tomorrow.